Jorge, ¿qué tal?
Yep.
John, who is Hedwig?
Who is she? What's happening with her in this movie? ¿Quién es Hedwig? ¿Y qué es lo que pasa con ella en esta película?
Does this person has any mysteries for you?
Is Hedwig embedded in your psyche now?
How do you relate to Hedwig?
Talk a little about where this character came from.
Is Yitzhak trying to be a man because you want her to be a man?
When did you come to terms with who you were?
Do they have any air you can turn on in here?
Being gay in Hollywood, that's
Yeah, I've heard of
and
that.
being closed and being open.
Did you want Hedwig in a way or another to be a kind of gay manifesto?
Did you train as a dancer?
You see this as a musical?
Any rock opera that influenced you?
Going on the way this is Spinal Tap.
Rocky Horror Picture Show and a little bit of Spinal Tap.
So, is it fun to do drag?
Your experience of being in drag.
What is it like for you putting on
In
the
real
dress?
life, you don't do drag.
Do you have some more plans with that?
What do you want to do now?
What do you want to do now?
What's your next project?
What's the next step?
What do you want to know? How did I think of Hedwig? How was it translating it from the play to the film? Who is the Hedwig within?
I met Stephen Trask. Well, I re-met him. I had met him on a plane years before when I was moving back to New York, on a plane to New York.
I walked over and I said, is this seat taken? And he said, no. And I said, do you mind if I sit here? And no. And so I sat down. I was reading a biography of Fassbinder at the time, so I sort of plunked it down on the seat between us, sort of a little conversation starter, a little testing, testing the waters. And he said, oh, are you in film? I said, no, I'm a musician. Are you in film? And he said, yes, I'm an actor.
And he had told me about his band. I finally went to see it at CBGB's, and it was great, Cheater.
Cheater started out as a trio, and he asked me to do sound for some of their gigs. And then after a few gigs, he asked me to be the bass player. The bass player moved to guitar.
I was very into this notion that I would develop this kind of persona of a kind of this sort of like arty queer punk kind of thing, and that's the perspective from which I wrote a lot of the songs.
It's kind of punk at times because sometimes we could be a little rough, but then he would also come up with these great kind of piano ballads that was completely out of line with the last song that we did.
I was really struck at how eclectic it was and how completely well-formed each genre of song was.
A heavy dose of songwriting, which we tried to bury in loud guitars. And it had somewhat of an audience. There wasn't really a queer punk movement at the time.
He said, I'd really like to work with you. And I was like, as a matter of fact, I have this piece I'm thinking about.
He had been looking for someone to work with on a rock theater piece, and particularly one that would involve a real band.
I would just tell him stories from my life, and he was like, that's interesting, that's not as interesting.
When John told me this story about this woman that he knew, and it was a very, it was like a monologue. It was like 10 minutes long, and it was all in the third person. And I was like on the edge of my seat the whole time. He's such a good storyteller. And I said, we should do this character, and you put a wig on, and do the same story, but you put it into the first person, and then like that's the whole scene there.
And he said, I'm working at this place, Don Hills, and they're having a new club called
I was the queen of rock and roll for 7 years at a club called Squeezebox.
Who in the house lives in New York City?
When I first got called to do Squeezebox, I had no idea what it was going to be, but I was told it was going to be very, very super hip. You know, this was going to be the thing.
It was sort of a sanctuary for a lot of us in New York City, a lot of us who were gay and loved rock and roll, a lot of us who didn't really necessarily have to go to a club with all gay people.
We knew the best drag talent in the world, but they were always lip-synced in performance. If we put them in front of a live band, then I thought we could really do something interesting.
Jesus Christ, it's about fucking time I got on stage.
When they were putting Squeezebox together, they called me up and asked me if I would be the music director of this night. And we were putting on these great drag shows with a four-piece punk band backing up drag queens.
Suddenly they realized they didn't have to sing that good to sing punk rock. You know, they just had to sing with feeling, and they were really punk rock. You know, they were much more punk rock than, you know, a kid in the mall with a mohawk. So I was watching these people find their voice, very excited, and Steven said, well, you should do a gig here, but you could only do the character that became Hedwig. You could only do the woman because it's a drag club.
I'm working on this drag character named Hedwig, and I was wondering if I could come in and do a performance.
My first gig there was in a sweaty, packed club, first time in drag.
Direct from communist East Berlin, by way of a trailer park in the Midwest. Let's put your hands together and welcome the internationally ignored song stylist, Hedwig! Give us some Hedwig! Don't you know me, baby? I'm the new Berlin Wall. Try and tear me down.
It was a raw show, but it was amazing. I mean, considering what was done at Squeezebox, which was most of the time drag queens coming in doing covers, Hedwig came in with not only rock and roll, but this incredible story about who this person was on stage.
I bet you're wondering how some girly boy named Hans from communist East Germany became the stunning creature barely standing before you. How the hell did he get over that wall? Honey, I flew over on a big balloon called love.
I thought he was nuts for a long time because I'm not accustomed to thinking this way. It was a revelation for me to take a drag character and view it in a way that you saw it as a whole person, someone who had a history, who had a life.
After my divorce to Sergeant Luther, I scraped by for a few years with babysitting and the odd job, mostly the job we call blow.
It was the audience immediately loved Hedwig. The audience immediately related. It was about this unique person who had issues just like everybody else about love and who they are and where they're going and what they want out of life.
Well, positive proof of gender, I said. A friend said she knew a certain doctor. Luther said he had some savings. I laughed in his face. Then I cried for the last time.
So we were really, you know, it was a drag act the first time we did it. You know, from the beginning I ripped the drag off. You know, I'd seen Mistress Formica's wig fall off in a performance of Rock and Roll Nigger, and she ripped her drag off too, and I thought, that's intense, you know, because drag queens just don't do that. And, you know, it became the center of the show, you know, ripping the drag off. So that was there from the beginning, and I hadn't been able to really let go in a part in a while. You know, and I'm entering a world that's very much about that, drag and rock and performance art, which is very much about being in the moment. And I wasn't really of that, so it was very new to me and nerve-wracking.
He brought this Broadway kind of voice, and it was so jarring.
I remember rehearsing with the band and singing, and afterwards Jack said, "Are you really going to sing with that vibrato?"
It was that collision between Broadway and rock. He would say, okay, well, why don't we try that song again? And he'd go 5, 6, 7, 8, and we wouldn't start because we'd be laughing so hard. Because you just don't, we'd go, you don't do that in rock. You say 1, 2, 3, 4.
And we're going to sing one song for you that Stephen wrote, something that we're both working on for a theatrical piece.
I think some of the queens felt they were being taken advantage of in that John was utilizing this to workshop an idea of his that they didn't fully understand. And here was a really talented, but not only talented, he was widely acknowledged for being talented. We all knew talented people, but this was someone who had won awards and had been in major productions. He had to be made to see. This was not a caricature that you could put on and take off. This was about a rock and roll sensibility that permeated every aspect of their lives. John had to pay his dues.
And then we did gigs every 6 months, and Mistress let me be the host, one night.
I did a wig for his first time he hosted Squeezebox, and he had this wig that was made out of cardboard, it was toilet paper rolls with hair wrapped around it, and I distinctly remember about halfway into the first song, the toilet paper roll started to come undone. So by the end, he's rocking out with toilet paper rolls dangling at the bottom of his wig that I had glued, to make that sort of, it was a side part, but sort of a prototype of what is now the Hedwig.
This is the first time it's been performed. It's the first song of the show, and it kind of sums up the philosophy of how we feel about love.
It was all there. We sang Origin of Love, first song that Stephen wrote.
The first thing that happened when John and I started working together, the first thing that we did was we walked to a bookstore and he bought me Plato's Symposium and the book and he gave it to me. He said, read this, there's a story in there I want you to adapt.
Can you make this into a song? And he did. He came back with this amazing song.
The idea of Plato's Symposium is that all the great fag writers and thinkers and whatever in Greece were all coming to dinner with their boyfriends, in their arms, and they were all too wasted from the night before to do any more drugs or drink or party at all, except for Socrates, who, as far as I can tell, is tripping his brains out and spinning in a circle in the driveway. They're all going to sit around, and someone said, why don't we all talk about where love comes from, what's love? And Aristophanes tells this story that's in the Origin of Love. I got this idea that if it was told as a bedtime story, like a picture book, and it has this sort of Dr. Seuss limerick sort of rhythm to it. The personal side is richer because you have that story that leads into it, but the story part only gains emotional resonance because you have that last thing, the last time I saw you.
Last time I saw you, we just split in two. You was looking at me, I was looking at you. You had a way so familiar that I couldn't recognize because you had blood in your face. I had blood in my eyes, but I could tell by your expression that you down your soul was a sin. So what caught me by? That's okay. Because you slid right down in your heart. We call it
The ultimate sadness of it is, if you think you found this person, you never really will unite with them. And I wanted Hedwig to be a walking metaphor for this myth.
I don't think anyone who went and saw Hedwig that night at Squeezebox had any idea that this was going to become something that was different. We just knew that we were going to take things further because we knew at the beginning that this wasn't where we were going, it was where we were coming from.
The show really had very little shape when I first came to the project. Up till this point, there had never been a director involved.
David Binder called me and asked me if I would work on it. And I looked at the material, and it was a mess, but it was a wonderful mess.
It was really a series of jokes and sketches and songs, and it wasn't a play. It didn't have a story at beginning, middle, end.
One of the main things at the beginning was to streamline and clarify what, in fact, the story was about.
I produced the original production of Hedwig and the Angry Inch for $29,000. We had so little money. The whole operation was run out of my apartment. We got everything you can imagine. Some way we did a trade or we got it for free.
I think I invested my salary of $700, actually.
My lawyer actually said, you know, if you want to invest in theater, why don't we do this instead? Just, you know, let's just take the money out of a cash machine and we'll set fire to it. So I borrowed $2,400 off a credit card and threw it at the show.
You know, Hedwig is really divided into three things. It's stand-up comedy with some hoary, cheap jokes. It's Stephen's wonderful music. And then it's also this unexpectedly poignant love story. And it was a question of first recognizing that and then shaping it so that the comedy came in certain sections, and whatever happened between the comedy and the music, it never took us away from Hedwig's journey.
When John and I first started working together on a theatrical piece, the main character was this Tommy Gnosis character.
Originally it was about Tommy, the other character, who was the son of the general, who was really me.
I'm a retired Army Major General. I had the great privilege and pleasure of serving in Berlin during the period 1984 to 1988. And in that time, I was further honored to serve as the U.S. Commander, U.S. Forces Berlin.
We moved every couple of years, so there was a sense of feeling not necessarily of one place. I was born in Texas. We lived in Oklahoma and Kansas and Colorado, Pennsylvania, Albuquerque, Chicago. I was in Scotland for a while, about 6 places in Germany.
The life of a dependent child in the military environment is positive. They become independent, they become sophisticated, and they become disciplined.
Tommy was a 15-year-old, four-eyed, knock-kneed, Dungeons and Dragons obsessed Jesus freak.
You know, very quickly, he and his family became something quite different. It was just the house that we lived in Kansas was just where I imagined Tommy living, and that's where Hedwig shows up too.
Ladies and gentlemen, little Tommy Speck, the general's son. Oh, he's a little embarrassed, hiding behind the hair.
When there is a town next to a large army post, a lot of the younger soldiers had been stationed overseas, and many of them had foreign wives, mostly Korean and German.
They'd always be working at the PX or living, in orbit around these bases.
Forgive me for I did not know.
When I was 14 in Junction City, Kansas, we used to hang out at this woman's trailer. She was a German army wife, divorced. She was very, sophisticated and tube top, and like Marlene Dietrich in a tube top, with the long Virginia Slim. She had come a long way. But she also had all these dates that would come up the driveway. She had a different date every day, and we thought, wow, she's not even that good looking, but she's so popular and sophisticated, and and she never knew what the dates were going to look like before they came up the road. And when they came up, we had to kind of go out the back door. But she would look through the curtains, you know, that were attached at the top and the bottom, and she'd, if she didn't like the look of them, she'd go out the back door with us.
And when he told me about her and turning tricks in her trailer park home, I just thought that we could make her into like a struggling rock musician who had once performed with this rock star when he was a teenager. Like she's stuck singing in the Wicked Little Town. She's singing the song Wicked Little Town that they sang together about getting out, but he got out and she didn't. And so now it's bittersweet because it used to be this song about leaving and he left and she didn't, and she's stuck there. We were visiting friends who were teaching in Grinnell, Iowa, which is not a very big place. And I thought, you know, this is where I'm going to start writing this song. And so I looked out that window and I tried to imagine what it would be like being Hedwig living in a town like this. When you're a musician and you know, your friends get signed or whatever, you know, people that you hung out with or whatever, and they get signed and they go off, and you guys used to be in a band together or whatever, you know, you can't help but be jealous. That part comes from me, you know, and it is me.
Have I introduced my husband, Yitzhak?
I like the idea of a phlegmatic, you know, rebellious roadie, and then Stephen was like, well, we really need a backup singer, and it probably should be a woman to get the right octave. And I was like, well, what if we combined, you know, the roadie with the backup singer, we had a woman playing a guy?
I didn't even question it, really. When I just thought, okay, woman's playing the man, all right, it's theater. It just makes you question what is male and what is female, and how we view that and how we judge that.
I mean, it's a hard part because you have to do nothing except radiate a kind of buried hostility and bitterness and be very minimal in your subversiveness.
Magnifying side is a little bit too much. Oh, that. Oh, very funny, Yitzhak. Very passive-aggressive for you to speak. Oh, look, Yitzhak, immigration.
There's a love there, I think, that is at the base of it all. Almost like obsessive love between Yitzhak and Hedwig, particularly Yitzhak for Hedwig. It's like Hedwig is Yitzhak's favorite performer.
Finners thought he'd make a great opening act. Built as the last Jewess in the Balkans, he lip-synced something from Yentl? Yeah. Under the name Crystal Nacht. Excellent. Very good. Actually, he was too good. His applause drowned out my introduction, and I refused to go on. But on my way out, he begged me to take him with me. My face might have been my mother's. It was so still.
Yitzhak's not given the opportunity to look better than Hedwig. You know, he can't perform with a wig on his head, but he can sing. He's there to sing, so every now and then I think it just comes out of him that, you know, watch me shine, you know, like a sort of Barbra Streisand moment of like, look at me world, I'm here. And Hedwig's always crushing that as it happens because, you know, she doesn't want to be shown up in front of her audience. And I think Yitzhak's the ultimate scapegoat. He doesn't want to be there. He wants to be much more fabulous than he is. So he's going the opposite direction and becoming scummy.
Ladies and gentlemen, whether you like it or not, Hedwig!
occupation was unique in all the world.
My dad had been a commandant in Berlin, so I was quite aware of the dramatic situation of that city, and I would cross over the wall and meet people in the east, and a guy who escaped to the west I met in a bar, you know, these homo punk bars in Kreuzberg, while my dad lived in a big mansion in the fancy area that was paid for by the German government.
We were given this house with 52 rooms, 9 of a staff, aides of all kinds coming out of the woodwork, and life became terribly exciting. All we did was what we've always done best, throw parties. There was a lot of diplomatic and even intelligence stuff going on there.
I was going to college, and I'd come back and stay at this place with a butler and chefs and guards and things, and students throwing things at him, and then I would sort of sneak out and meet people who would have thrown eggs at my dad, you know, earlier in the day, and then invite them to dinner with my dad at night, and they all got along famously, and so there was this interesting, you know, different sides of the city that I could see.
The wall in occupied Berlin ran down this line right here. And initially, it was merely a barbed wire obstacle. They woke up in the morning, and there were East German soldiers establishing this fence. It was improved until finally it was a solid concrete wall. The German citizens were unable to pass.
When I went over, it was with the military cars and stuff, and if you had a uniform, you could cross easily, which is why Luther, you know, appears in the East.
This was pretty dim over here, and Hansel was listening to Armed Forces radio every day. And it was all these Hansels, I believe, that were stimulated by what was available in free West Berlin that caused them to risk their lives and the lives of their children and leave their families.
After dessert, Luther produces a ring, an application for American citizenship, and a wig. He loves me, Mother. He wants to marry me and get me the hell out of here.
I've never been to Germany, but every Jew has a relationship to Germany. When I was growing up, my mom would tell me about the Holocaust. She'd say, you know, they killed Jews and they skinned them and made lampshades out of their skin and, you know, took the gold out of their teeth and sold it. You know, it's like, what is, you know, it's sort of insane. So growing up with this notion that there's this place where people did that to people like you because they were like you.
On August 12th, 1961, a wall was erected down the middle of the city of Berlin. The world was divided by a Cold War, and the Berlin Wall was the most hated symbol of that divide. Reviled, graffiti, spit upon, we thought the wall would stand forever. And now that it's gone, we don't know who we are anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, Hedwig is like that wall.
Hedwig broke new ground. It's truly a rock musical.
Most rock musicals are just kind of silly because they're made by people that don't really know anything about rock music.
And then in the second verse, there was like a little kind of George Harrison, like, you think that love has left you there? And there's this kind of like just line in between the first line and the second line, like a little like.
I love the idea of the form, the idea that you can put narrative and songs together and make something even bigger than just a play or just, you know, a gig or a concert.
And I was thinking you look so fine in a velvet dress with heels and an ermine stole.
Oh, Luther, darling, heaven knows I've never put on women's clothes, except for once my mother's pantyhose. You believe only a woman can ever truly love me.
The same way that rock music forms that sort of bond between an audience and a performer who are different from each other but somehow identify, I think that musicals, when they really work, are set in some other culture that people can then go and look at, whether it's Fiddler on the Roof, which is set in this Jewish shtetl culture, or Hedwig, which is coming out of this sort of like punk rock, you know, milieu.
Don't you know me? I'm the new girl at Morgan. Giant hair,
That sort of notion was influential on me, if not any particular musical. I just the notion that you go and you see something from another place. It keeps it from being just, you know, 2-3 kick turn kind of crap. Hedwig's putting on a show, so there's a reason for her to break into a song. The same way that Sally Bowles is putting on a show in Cabaret, or the kids in The Sound of Music are learning how to sing from their governess, and so they have a reason to break into song. Once we accepted that gimmick, if there's ever any doubt why you're breaking into a song, you have to fall back on, well, because this is her gig and that's her show.
I got a sweet tooth, licorice drops and jelly roll. Oh my goodness.
A musical that influenced us that was sort of a pop musical is Sandra Bernhard's Without You I'm Nothing. Sandra Bernhard was like Elvis Presley for us. And then like the sort of notion of the concept album, Lou Reed's Transformer, which is like a stage musical, even to the point that it actually has stage direction as one of the lyrics, because there's the line, "and the colored girls sing," which is actually a sung stage direction. And so when I started approaching Hedwig as a means for a series of songs that would tell stories, I just tried to focus in on narratively what's the kind of voice that can tell these sorts of stories.
When we did Hedwig, we could not give the tickets away. People walked out. Many of the same people who today will tell you they saw Hedwig at Westbeth and it was the most incredible thing. Those very people walked out. People were not remotely interested in what we were doing there. They thought it was weird. They said, when John is finished with this whole rock and roll downtown drag thing, we'll get him to be in our Broadway musical.
People weren't coming, you know, it was like really slow. It was too rock and roll for some of the uptown theater people. It was too rock and roll for maybe the gay audience. It was too theater for the rock audience.
In order to get the show up, I had to become a producer and also build the theater. And fortunately it worked out. It was a huge risk.
Cameron Manheim, the actress, I was looking for a space for the play. I didn't want it to be in a regular theater. And she said, oh, there's some hotel on the river that has a space in it. And I said, well, what hotel, what space? She's like, I don't know. So I walked up and down the river, and this is the only hotel left on the river. So I went in to the lobby there, and I said, do you have a theater? No. Sorry. And then the janitor said, maybe he means the ballroom. Come this way. So he opened that space, and with only a flashlight, you know, I saw the ballroom, and it was like, oh my God, this is brilliant.
It just was the right space. So we just decided one really humid August day that on February 1st we would have our first preview in the Jane Street. And then it was just a race against the clock to get the theater built.
Well, here's the theater. We got some movie theater seats from Long Island, put them in. We built the theater. All this decor up here. Hello. Show us the decor, darling. Decor. All this decor was actually put in for The Preacher's Wife, that Whitney Houston movie. And we just kept it and extrapolated upon it. And that's how I feel about my performance. I just extrapolated upon Whitney. We opened here Valentine's Day in '98.
Don't you know me? I'm a new girl in the water, baby. Try and tear me down. I was born on the other side of the town.
Hotel Riverview which is where the Jane Street Theater is. It sits on the West Side Highway in the middle of what is called the Meatpacking District, which is still an active butcher, a slaughterhouse neighborhood, which at night has changed in the past into transvestite prostitute run. But I think it just helps put an audience in a sense of adventure and puts them in the mood for what they're going to see. It's not the kind of show that belongs in Midtown or in the Broadway district.
I'm thrilled you could be part of this special opening night performance here at the beautiful Hotel Riverview. Yes, Hotel Riverview. You can really view the river.
One of the very first previews of Hedwig, and there's like 200 people on the sidewalk, and everyone's sort of like, you know, waiting before they open the house, and Adele Beauvais, who's the house manager, the county coroner's there, and there's one elevator and one entrance to the Jane Street, and that's it. And they were bringing him down in the elevator, the corpse. And Adele was like, you know, this is bad. We've got like 200 people. They're getting ready to go see Hedwig. What are we going to do? You know, and the guy's like, I can't help you. I'm not going to hold a body for your show. Like, you know, this has got to go down, like, no matter what. So we're just standing there, and like this body comes on a gurney, covered in a body bag, down the stairs, and this like kind of middle-aged, like kind of Jersey lady turns to her friend, and she's like, is this part of the show?
The toilet would leak from upstairs and drip onto the stage. Part of the set fell down and almost killed the bass player one night. Strange people coming up to the stage, you know, people overdosing in the rooms above us, prostitutes coming and going, you know, typical theater stuff. No. Because of the location, you know, basically a flop house on the river.
This is the lobby of the hotel. This is the Hotel Riverview. Some of our lovely employees. And this hotel actually is where the Titanic surviving crew stayed. And there's a plaque down here which is completely illegible, but it says something like, in memory of the Titanic survivors. But it's in Braille now. Here's some pictures of the Titanic survivors over here. Here they are. And that's actually the space where we performed. So here's all the surviving crew. You can see it even says, surviving crew, given new clothing. But by accident, they were all given women's clothing. But that's actually a lie. It's a lie, but it sounds good.
You know, this grand ballroom has a celebrated history as a place of sanctuary, of succor, if you will. Having once sheltered the surviving crew of the Titanic. Yes, it's topical, but it's true. Perhaps they can hear me now. You brave, unfortunate souls, blasted by man's hubris, washed up on cruel shores. I, who am simply blasted and washed up. So.
This seat over here, 2 seats behind me, was the seat that I would, you know, whoever was sitting in that seat, I would sit on their face and sugar daddy, you know, and give them a car wash.
Some sugar daddies in the house, I bet there are. Just touch it. Oh, touch it. Oh, you can give me a cavity.
Joey Ramone was in that seat, and Larry Kramer, and they start putting fun people in there because they always knew that I would go to that seat. Man or woman, whoever it was, would get the car wash. This room is where we're going right now. It looks better over here. This is our dressing room. That's the front entrance. That's the Hudson River. Now this is that big octagonal tower. It used to be completely bare. I used to go out on the roof and sing, you know, into the river to warm up, and it just feels like home. if the elevator operator wasn't available, I'd walk down all the way, 6 floors, in heels. It was really good for the legs, actually. And we would go through here to the theater. And I would just sit here for a while, preparing for the show, singing Nessun Dorma or Tomorrow Belongs to Me as a warm-up. And we used to just wait for the audience to file in. It smells like piss, but do you have the smell-o-rama on? I'd come out of the theater at the end of the show, my makeup was all wrecked, I was practically naked. The band and me would just sort of go down this hall, and there were all these people here, German backpackers and junkies, and this guy suddenly opened the door as I was walking past, I think it was here, and he just grabbed me and said, "You're so fucking beautiful. I'm from Israel. Come into my room." And he was really cute, so I didn't know what to do. He was a fan.
I said, "Will I enjoy it?" And he says, "I think so." And I said, "Will I be embarrassed?" And he went, "Well, I don't know." And he said, "But if you think you're going to be, don't come till the second show." Because there was going to be 2 shows that night. So actually I did. I didn't want him to feel that there was Mother and there might be some naughty words being said, and he would feel embarrassed with his mother there.
And I remember saying to him, and I will never, I'll never be allowed to live this down, I said, you know, this is all really terrific, very unusual and probably groundbreaking kind of stuff you're doing here, but do you think you'll ever get back to Broadway musicals, Secret Garden sort of thing? Wow, that was almost the end of the dinner conversation.
The final song was a German version of You Light Up My Life. And when we couldn't get the rights to that for the production, Stephen went home and in a few days came up with his version of Midnight Radio.
I holed myself up in a room with books of poetry and records, and I just didn't sleep for a few days.
Rain falls hard, bells drown, a dream, a song that hits you so hard, filling you up, and suddenly gone.
And just like this sort of like 2 sides kind of thing, and I kind of like see those as part of Midnight Radio, as those coming together, and the female singer and the rocker, and bringing them together into one, which is part of Hedwig's story.
I did 7 shows a week here for about 10 months, and most of that time I didn't have an understudy, so I couldn't really even take a day off. It was totally a relief to let go of it. It became too much.
Many people thought we should simply close the show when he stopped doing the role. unfortunately, we didn't agree with that, and Michael Cerveris came on and really proved that the show was not just about one performer.
Everybody involved with the production was, I guess, a little nervous because nobody had tried to do it, and nobody, including me, knew whether anybody but John could play it. And I think it was a relief to everybody, especially John, to find out that it could live on beyond him. One of the things that appealed to John about my doing it, besides the fact that, you know, that I played in rock bands and played with people like Bob Mould and knew that side of things, was that I also was sort of making it safe for uptown people to come see it. It's like, oh, well, the guy from Broadway and Tommy and Titanic, of all things, is in it, so, you know, maybe it is something that we'd like.
Michael was quite beautiful in his makeup and his wig, but he was a tough, really rock and roller, and was John's equal in terms of working an audience. Kevin Cahoon was someone we auditioned 60 or 70 actors as possible understudies. He was the only one I saw who I thought I really would like to see him do this role.
And I did The Lion King, original company, where I played the crazy, retarded hyena. And when I was doing The Lion King, I saw Hedwig downtown. I just went on my night off alone to the show, and after the show I was like, I have to do this.
Kevin Cahoon was really in your face and very, like a big exclamation point style Hedwig. Let's see, how did Donovan do it? I don't remember. It was your first shows, you were nervous a little bit. A little nervous. You sang probably best of all the Hedwigs, I think. But your acting was, you were more like you were concentrating on memorizing things.
It looked like Sandra Bernhard was going to do Hedwig. And that opened our thinking to a woman doing it. But John had met Ali out at Sundance, and Ali's a wonderful actor.
Ali Sheedy had a really cold, steely kind of Hedwig.
Ali Sheedy was the most intense Hedwig I've ever seen. Intense. Whoa, like you were just like, you know, in a scary but really great way. You know, like I have a lot of respect for her. Asa Summers is like the cutest thing, the most beautiful Hedwig. He looked like Kirstie Alley as Hedwig.
Matt McGrath, I have to say, was the purest in terms of acting, was the purest, and in some ways, because of that, the most poignant of all the Hedwigs. He could be still in a way very few actors can, and just the simplicity of that stillness was extraordinarily moving.
It was quite gratifying to see other people saying the same words in a different way and it still being valid. You know, and often I would direct the actors and put them into the show.
Performing in drag and having that size of a mask, really, to be able to not really hide behind it, actually kind of gave me an opportunity to show more aspects of myself and put more of myself into the performance.
I would do Michael Cerveris as Hedwig, and there'd be a picture of him in a newspaper, and people would think it was John. Or like John would think it was himself.
Every actor who's played this role has created their own Hedwig, and their own experience has, you know, brought new angles to the character, and I think that it really is a testament to the writing. It's so good that anyone can step into Hedwig's shoes.
I only saw the show 4 times. We only had the pleasure of seeing it 6 times.
25 times.
I saw Hedwig and the Angry Inch 68 times.
100 even.
At least 300 times.
400 some odd times.
425 times, 400 just in New York alone.
How many times did you see the show? I saw it once.
Heads are young gay boys, old straight women. It runs the gamut.
Went to it and was completely fascinated by
what was going on in this theater and why all these people, what this enveloping network of people was.
It's become such a huge part of my life that I had to make it for the rest of my life.
And who are the rest of the tattoos you've got?
Oh, David Bowie.
I'd walk down the aisle at the beginning of Tear Me Down, and you'd see people jumping up and down in their seats, so excited for the show to start.
When I saw the show for the 400th time, they unveiled at where I usually sit, they put a dedication for me that says my name, Hedwig, and the 400th time I saw the show.
I met my partner Jamie when he actually came to see Hedwig in March of '99. On January 11th, 2000, we were married at the Jane Street Theater on the stage of Hedwig.
Since we were so in love with the show, we're like, well, what about renting out the theater and having, you know, the whole cast be there and play songs, and maybe we can get John ordained.
Now, please honor the voyeur in all of us with a kiss. Watch out for that first.
It just became a part of their lives, and they became a part of Hedwig, literally, in the movie. You know, they were not a part of the play, and they just became a part of the play by becoming the audience.
Then it started to pick up a kind of downtown hipster kind of crowd, and you got people then like Lou Reed coming to see the show, and even people like Bowie and Madonna, and you know, all these people started showing up.
So we fought for all the audiences, but once they were here, they loved it.
The demographics started to change, and we started to get people who were more traditional uptown theater goers.
And the rock people thought, wow, I thought theater sucked. And theater people who were like, I thought rock was too much, but now that it has a story, I can relate to punk rock. You know, my mother was like, I can relate to punk rock.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joan Jett!
We had concert performances, and those moments were the most exciting. The audience or the hilarity wouldn't get out of control. You could always bring it back to the heartbreak or the melancholy, but anything could happen. It's been in Boston, LA, Seattle, Chicago, London, Cologne. It's in Iceland, Manila. And I love the fact that it's going on, you know, in colleges or, I don't know, nursing homes and wherever, you know, they can get a stage and sound system.
It seems like almost from the beginning I really felt like I knew that it was probably going to become a movie, you know, and John always, and Steven as well, always spoke of things like, you know, oh, wouldn't this be great if this was like, you know, shot in a movie, or see, it was always like that kind of talk.
Some people were like, don't do a movie, you know, it's too, you'll mess it up.
I finally got Mike DeLuca down to see the show. It won him over instantly. Actually, it was right in the middle of Origin of Love. He elbowed me, I think he bruised a rib, and said, you know, these songs are amazing. The songs in this show are just amazing. And the next day, he bought the property for New Line Cinema.
They were allowed to bring whatever producer they wanted to the table. We needed to approve them, but however they wanted to get there, however they wanted to make the movie, they could do it.
The first time I saw the show, I saw it with the whole company. So all of Killer Films went in. We were about 8 people. Went in and sat down. We all sat in a row, I remember. And when the show ended, I just sort of looked down the row, and we were all like, with our jaws dropped.
The things that were key to us was that John had to star in the movie, and that we really wanted John to direct the film. And he was, at first, he was interested in directing the film, but he kind of wanted a co-director because he thought it'd be a lot to take on.
I went to the Filmmakers Lab for Sundance in June, which is where you actually work on scenes, and that's where I was assigned DP by Michelle Satter, and I was given a crew and brought in Miriam Shore and another actor to play Tommy. the real purpose of the lab was to figure out if I should direct myself.
Where are you from?
It was Michelle's idea to actually have me direct myself in the Adam and Eve scene and then have someone else direct me in the same scene. I brought in Tom Kalin, who directed Swoon. I'm from Communist East Berlin.
Uh-huh.
I met an American GI named Luther. He suggested I get a sex change and become a woman. His face might have been a Yes album cover. It was so still. I realized I was just completely bored to be just an actor. And when I would, pipe in on ideas, it was just, we didn't have time for two directors. There needs to be a final say.
In the lab, there's this whole scene where they sort of get together. I remember we rehearsed it, we were really happy with it, and the morning of, I woke up at like 5:30 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I remember there were like a couple of pieces of laundry hanging in our set decoration. I just thought, wow, what if suddenly those couple of pieces of laundry turned into a huge forest of laundry? As I told John, I said, it's just a thought anyway. If we augment all the amount of laundry in there, what do you think? And then you have to go through that. And he thought for a second, yeah, that sounds great. Can we do that? And suddenly we had our set dresser, we had to raid her panty drawer and bra drawer and everything and just set up all this great stuff. And it really worked.
What came clear was that he knew the material, he knew the part, he knew the lines, he knew the words to the songs. And it came clear that he was really the one to direct it as well. John went to L.A. to meet Michael Pitt, and they had a casting session there in L.A.
My fucking mother, and my dad, and my fucking parents.
Some people thought, well, you should play Tommy too in the film. And it's like, no way. I want to do a scene with someone who's real. I can make out with them. It's like instead of making out with myself in some digital way. My Canadian casting director said, I found this kid who's totally you as a kid. And I looked at his tape and I was like, I don't see it. He came in and he was just so small, very self-possessed. And I said, do you want to just talk as if in a German accent? He's like, well, I can do O Canada in German. I was like, what?
O Canada, our home and native land, true hate with love, in all our people's command.
I didn't even know O Canada. We were just frozen. We were trying not to laugh, but at the same time it was kind of moving. It was just clear. It was something about him that was just serious. I saw a lot of great people for Phyllis Stein, in fact, more than I deserved, because I realized that I wrote a lot of stuff that couldn't make it in the film.
The back of my neck. Could I rub it on your knee? What is it? Hey, I'm American. What do I know? I'm trying to fit in. I can't.
She was a real theater person, New York style, too.
I'm
feeling a little bit
out of it. Ostracized. Paranoid.
Andrea was just so game, and her auditions were so hilarious, and her improvs were amazing, and she's always been a big, idol of mine. We started working very early and, for free.
Therese Dupre and John and I started meeting, and we went through that script page by page on the floor of John's little one-bedroom apartment in the Village. We would watch movies. He would tell me, I want you to look at this movie. There's some movie, a Rossellini movie that has some interesting things, and there was Kieslowski.
Altman and Hal Ashby, for some reason being there, the tone of being there was the closest to what I was looking for in a film. It's somewhat naturalistic, but very much a fairy tale too, kind of heightened. And Fosse, for sure. We looked at Cabaret and Lenny for structure, and then All That Jazz was really useful. It made me think that once there was a strong narrative center and a central character, each scene could have its own style.
In December, I think, of 1999, John did a command performance, 3 final John Cameron Mitchell as Hedwig on stage performances, and I said, why don't I take one of my movie cameras and we'll load up some film and shoot some different stocks during the play or before the play, whatever. We shot reversal film and negative film. We pushed the film. We shot 16 millimeter. We shot 35 millimeter. We shot a bunch of things, and then we went down to Technicolor and projected them and looked at them all. And it turned out John actually liked the color negative.
John wanted to put some animation in it, which I thought was a great idea. You know, originally in the play they have all the bedsheet art.
My way of thinking about it was that the animation was the kind of art and the art that Hedwig would have made.
The mythological side, but also the punk rock side. You know, I wanted it to sometimes get more towards her more jagged lines.
John had to figure out really to the cut where animation was going to be, how it was going to relate to the songs, and where, you know, from what those transitions even would be.
So this is just to show you, this is like on this exposure sheet we track read the entire song, and so we had where the basic rhythm of the song was and where the lyrics of the song were, and then you can relate what actual drawings go along with what beat. But one night in the middle of the night I woke up and sort of was imagining how he could be hanging out with his punk rock friends and then go up and write this, you know, sort of maybe in a personal moment draw the picture of the eye, like the eye is always watching him. You know, deny me and you're doomed, as sort of a loyalty to that early belief of the wholes and the halves. And that existed as cave painting somewhere in Hedwig's mind. So the sort of more teenage version of that would be graffiti on a wall.
The animation is handmade, you know, it's not digital, it's not as... There's less generations between the hand and the eye.
This is my trailer. It's enormous and almost unseemly. It's pretty big. I don't need this. Skylight. Shower. It's a fucking shower. Full. It's almost a walk-in closet.
There's no way to turn the light on.
Frank, DeMarco, John, and I would talk through every scene that we were going to shoot the next day and plan it and storyboard it. So there's an incredible amount of collaborative discussion about everything.
So you're sitting here, you're waiting for your food, you look up, and you're upset with what's going on. Okay? Yep.
The way to get the kind of atmosphere where Hedwig lives is not to just stick her in a cool club, but to put her on tour and get the kind of sleaze and the drudgery of a tour.
The original screenplay, I actually had Hedwig performing in different places, an airport lounge, in a bowling alley, and a rest stop, you know, on the highway, and that just became prohibitively expensive.
All of Bilgewater's took place in this one rundown, I think it was like a wagon wheel family dining restaurant that had gone out of business. We found it and moved right in.
I'm just going to go downstairs for a minute.
So all of the Bilgewater stage performances all take place in one restaurant that we just sort of moved from corner to corner. And again, Therese's genius sort of did the set dressing to make it feel like you were in a different place.
With her little homage to the Jane Street Theater and the Titanic going down on the walls.
Take note of the sinking ships in the background.
Everybody back up first, please. We'll block this road.
One really hard thing about pulling this film off for the amount of money that we had that I'm still not quite sure how we did it, was recording live music on the set.
I really didn't want to lip sync.
Is my hair melting under the lights?
We got to the set, and all the band stuff is pre-recorded, and then we did the vocals live.
Here we go. Lay back.
Part of the thing was putting on a show. So there was a live mix that was going on from the person that was recording the vocals. They were also running the tracks out to these monitors, and it created the sense that this was a live event, because the whole mix was in these two stereo monitors, but also there's drums coming out of the drum monitor, so it's actually located at the drummer. And the bass sound is coming from where the bass player is standing because it's coming out of his monitor. The lights on the amps are on, but there's nothing really happening there. And we would just do take after take.
Ladies and gentlemen, whether you like it or not, we're shooting. Lay back.
I think the main thing I wanted to do when making the soundtrack as opposed to making the cast album was to really focus on trying to record it in a way that when you heard it on an album would sound like a real record, but when you saw it in the movie would really seem like it was the live performance.
We did all the basic tracks, bass, drums, guitar, some keyboards.
We slowed the tempos a little bit so that the lyrics were more decipherable.
Having Bob Mould on it and stuff was really gave it a different kind of muscle.
We just kind of punked it up a little bit and roughened it up.
You want me, baby, I tell you. Wow, try to tear me down.
There were scenes where we'd have to reshoot because he'd be like no pins, and like he'd do one, the wig would fly, and we'd cut and we'd have to pin it or tape it on. A lot of glued on wigs. And when the pins came out, boy, it was like battling time in the hair and makeup trailer too, because John, it was painful.
Ah!
Look at him and he's
Ricky!
The Berlin stuff, we were thinking at one time of making the frame or the aspect ratio of the Berlin stuff like a square, so suddenly the whole film frame would be smaller to sort of set up, you know, Hedwig being stuck in a box. Late at night, I would listen to the voices of the American masters. Tony Tennille, Debbie Boone, Anne Murray, who was actually a Canadian working in the American idiom. These right angles and these lines and these perimeters are very important to Hedwig, which is why we kept a lot of static shots, you know, so you're really aware of the proscenium.
Look at that. Oh, it's incredible. It's very exciting to see what this looks like. I've only ever heard it described in a monologue. Therese is very detail-oriented. Look at the crap above the cupboards.
She's unbelievably detailed, you know, in every book that's in Tommy's wall and every, you know, classic rock album cover that's hidden back there. It's just like, it's, you know, I feel so guilty not doing an insert of everything.
Wig in a box scene when the trailer wall comes down. They did that with ropes, you know, they craned down with pulleys and ropes. It was so imaginative. I didn't know that was going to happen. I arrived on set, and when I saw that they had rigged it with light bulbs and that they were going to have the whole wall come down, I just thought, wow, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. It's so trashy and so fun.
I assume that she went with the resources she had, and she probably got her stuff at like the Army base thrift store or the Salvation Army, and for her that was Neiman Marcus, that was Barney's, that was the mother lode. Oftentimes if you see transgender people, it's this heightened feminine reality. The bra's a little bit more pushed up, the color's a little brighter, the shoulder pad's a little tweak.
Suddenly I'm this punk rock star of stage and screen, and I ain't I'm never turning back.
Ironically, John has like the perfect idealized women's body in that unrealistic way that fashion models are in magazines. He has no hips, he's petite, and he fits a size 4'6" women's clothes.
I didn't want John to look like a drag queen in this movie, and there were moments where I really wanted him to look like a woman. The moments where she's with Tommy, and like in love, I think it was really important to have her be like really soft and beautiful. John, halfway through the day, it was a ritual. He would shave through his makeup, and we would just it was fine. Nothing. It wouldn't even remove the makeup. Just shave with the makeup on.
Suddenly I'm
Miss Beehive 19. Well, this is what she has on her head, believe it or not. Doesn't look like it anymore. No one was allowed to be blonder than Hedwig on stage or in the film.
Hedwig goes blonder as she reaches her pinnacle and kind of dinges out in, later scenes.
Wigs in there. This is John Cameron Mitchell's head. Hairline was made for his head. All individually hand-tied by some poor Korean woman.
And we talk about different rock stars, and we had the Chrissy Hynde and the Ricky Lee Jones and the Tina Turner looks. It was a constant dialogue.
Listen to the story about the girl named whatever. It's very like, I Will Survive, Gloria Gaynor or whatever. Gloria Gaynor. The Tina where she's like, at the end, she rips off her dress and stuff. I made that. All the roots are done with Sharpie. You can see.
The time I spent with him was very calming, and when everything else was insane, he was always there, ready to help. In the middle of a nightmare of shooting, he created a haven and would sort of kick everyone aside, keep them out of the trailer while we got ourselves together.
Johnny was in high heels with a wig on, and he had a little makeup thing, and his makeup man was just always powdering him and so forth. And then he would hobble over after he did a scene and look at the takes.
You had a way so familiar, I could not recognize 'cause you had that on your face.
I just don't know how he did it. Must have been torture, walking around those heels. Because once you got them on, you didn't want them off, because it was too hard to get them on again.
We knew we were going to have to protect him during the process because he was going to be really uncomfortable. He was going to be uncomfortable shooting. He was going to be tired, and we knew that we had to keep him buoyant.
I remember one day, it was really hard, long day. We were shooting Sugar Daddy. I called Christine and I said, John's exhausted. I don't know how we're ever going to get through this day. What are we going to do? We sort of brainstormed about it, and the only thing we could come up was for me to rub his legs.
I don't know. Either he was on some very heavy medication or he's just really supposed to be doing this, Maybe not in a wig and heels. Maybe he should just wear his own clothes from now on.
Action. The shooting process was not fun at all. I mean, it was truly a marathon and not just, it was barely getting through. I had very little fun on it, and people, because I just couldn't enjoy what we had just done, because I always had to think about what we weren't getting and how short the day was.
Okay. So let's just do the action. We'll just very carefully do the lines. I think put your head back where I said. Stephen, in front of your section.
I think it definitely inspired the crew to have this guy in a wig and a dress and heels riding around the dolly all the time, giving out direction.
Some people were thrown by the way we were working, but others were really energized, and we had a drag day.
Drag day was a real eye-opener for me because I had done a couple of films in Toronto, and you have this image of these burly Canadian guys who work on films up there.
I was like, yeah, drag day, whatever. What's the next shot, And then I arrive, it's actually the only day I'm not in drag, and everyone is in drag.
All of these big, hairy guys got dressed to the nines and took it deadly seriously.
The girls in the craft truck were like disco divas, you know. I, halfway through the day, like the makeup and hair department, we like pumped everyone up.
At the wrap party, people even came up to John and said, I'm not the type of guy who's attracted to guys, but if I was the type of guy who is attracted to guys, I'd be attracted to you. Wink, wink.
Once we got to the editing room, we both knew very strongly what we had and started to figure out what we needed.
We kept restructuring the film, and as we progressed, it became more and more apparent that the actual narrative of the story was much less important than the emotional arc. It became much more about Hedwig's psychological state and leading towards Hedwig's breakdown.
Sundance was surreal. It was so exciting.
So it was too much press. There were too many family members, too many crew members to sort of make sure everyone has their ticket, but people had a great time. And then I was also able to kind of let go of the film a little and let it happen and not just think about the cut and the edit and the sound and everything, and just kind of get caught up in the story again.
The moment that first screening was over, Sundance was just one big party. It was like every day I just woke up with this sense of elation and joy and exhaustion. Everything felt like a better version of itself. Walking in town just felt like really cool.
We were hopeful that maybe Hedwig had a shot at the Audience Award because it seemed people really liked it. And then, you know, when the votes were in or whatever, and it got the Audience Award, we just went crazy.
Thank you. If I thanked everybody who was involved with this since 1994 when we started working in rock clubs, it would take up the whole night, but there's some very important people. Of course, I have to thank my parents who are actually watching in a condo about 200 yards away because they couldn't get in, and my boyfriend, Jack. And my partner since 1994, the guy who wrote all the music and lyrics, Stephen Trask.
And then we waited for the dramatic thing, and we didn't know, you know, because, you know, some people thought a musical, maybe not.
The 2001 Directing Award in the dramatic competition goes to John Cameron.
He conducted himself very well, very low-key and humble. I would have dressed him differently for the event.
All right, well, there's a lot of proud people, and I'm one of them. All right, John.
Thank the Lord for allowing me.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
There's a spiritual.
Hedwig and the Angry Inch has taken over the rock and roll airwaves.
Beautiful, it was a fantastic performance.
I love the movie Hedwig. I think it's a revolution.
And projectionists, turn it up.
Freaks must unite.
rain falls.
You sit in the audience and you say, I have nothing in common with a person who has sacrificed their manhood for freedom. Like, what do I know about that? But as you go through the story and her story is told to you, you say, I have everything in common with Hedwig because I know what it's like to want to be loved, and I know what it's like to search for your other half, and I know what it's like to not fit in.
While the things that she wants or remembers or regrets are specific to her, to some extent everyone feels like they are the sum total of all their bad decisions.
Exposing yourself in all of your failings and weaknesses and humiliations, it's asking who you really are at bottom.
You're shackled sometimes, but yet you're free inside. So our definition of freedom is to do what you want. That isn't freedom. That's license. Freedom has boundaries, and it ends at your nose.
The wig is necessary for development. It's like the Lord of the Rings. It's the ring, you know. It's the thing that you hate and need at the same time. In that case, it's to be invisible, you know. And in Hedwig's case, it's to be visible and to find your way in this quest, you know, for your other half. Like Hedwig at the end of the film, I don't really need the wig anymore, and I actually find it very uncomfortable, you know, but I'm quite happy to give the wig to someone else. Was still flat, and clouds made of fire, and mountains stretched up to the sky, sometimes higher. Folks roamed the earth like big rolling kegs. They had two sets of arms, they had two sets of legs, they had two faces peering out of one giant head, so they could watch all around them as they talked while they read, and they never knew nothing of love. It was before the origin of love.